Hey everybody, Jerome Light here, Director of Student Ministries at Copperhead Community Church in Lenexa, Kansas. I hope that you all had a wonderful week. You've got some time to spend with your families. Congrats to the seniors who are graduating this weekend. You guys made it, way to go. There's going to be great things for you in your future. I can't wait to see where God takes you in those. It's going to be awesome though. I can tell you that. You're taking a huge step in the next life, and I just want to say congratulations for that. Yeah, but let's jump in. So, as you know, we've been talking about the series called Atypical. 2 weeks ago, we started this series. We talked about how God uses atypical families. We talked about Adam and Eve, really atypical family. It's kind of weird to think about. Last week, we talked about how God uses atypical families. They pray for one another. And we talked about Abraham and Lot. These two cousins who hated each other, basically. But Abraham prayed for Lot to save his life. It was something really cool to see. So atypical families pray for each other. This week, we're going to look into another thing atypical families do, and that is have tough conversations. Take a minute. Think about a tough conversation you've had. I can tell you one thing's for sure. I've had to have plenty of them. And none of them made me feel good at first. But in the long run, when I came down to it, it made things better. But take a minute and just remember those emotions you felt before going into that conversation. For me, it was a pit in my stomach of, man, this is going to stink. Why is this happening? What am I going to do? It was rough. I never wanted to do it. In fact, there were some moments where I didn't. I look back now and wish I had those tough conversations. Some of them aren't necessary anymore, which is why I'm not having them now. I can say I wish I had them, but I don't need them anymore. But the fact of it is tough conversations are hard to have. Sometimes it makes things difficult. Sometimes it makes things easy. But now take a minute and think about it this way. A tough conversation with a friend is way easier than having a tough conversation with someone who is in your family. Someone you can't really run away from. Someone that 1 minute you're having a tough conversation with, and then the next you're sitting around the dinner table. That's not a fun thing to do, especially after a tough conversation, because sometimes they can be resentment, pain, hurt, a lot of different things. But as I said last week and said the last few weeks, every family is atypical. And that's just true. There is no perfect family. So let's take a minute and let's look at what may be some reasons why we have to have tough conversations. Some of those can be different of opinions. They could be an unwise choice. They could be hurt feelings. Or even more, there could just be a misunderstanding that needs to be explained. But the fact of it is, everyone needs to have tough conversations. Whether we want to or not, it's part of life, tough conversations. If you haven't been to the point where you've had to have one of those yet, just know it's coming, I promise you. I'm sorry to have to promise you that, but it is on its way because tough conversations are part of life. Now, let's look at this. So, a typical family, let's think about it. What would they do? They'd take a minute, and they'd probably just let it pass over. They wouldn't talk about it. They'd probably ignore the fact of the situation and just keep moving on. It's not a healthy place to be. But an atypical family, you know what they do? Even though they may not want to, they find the person they need to have the tough conversation with. They sit down together and they have that tough conversation. They sit there and they talk to one another. They work it out and they figure it out. And having tough conversations is something that can be used by God. As I said a little bit earlier, last few weeks we've talked about a few different families. We talked about Adam and Eve. We talked about how they were just an atypical family, how they weren't normal. I mean, think about it. One of their sons killed another one. I can't say many families have that. And then we talked about Abraham and Lot, two cousins who hated each other, but Abraham still prayed for it because it was an atypical family. He prayed for Lot so his life would be saved. This week we're going to look at a different family. Kind of the same family. We're going to be looking at Isaac and Rebekah. We're going to talk a little bit about them, but even more, we're going to talk about their sons, Jacob and Esau. So let's figure this out. So first off, you have Abraham. We talked about him last week. So Isaac is actually Abraham's son. You know, I said that last week. I said it was an atypical family because Abraham was having a son at a really old age. Yeah, that was Isaac. That was that son. So now we're to the next generation. We're to Isaac's family. So the fact is, though, we're going to look at these two brothers, Jacob and Esau, the sons of Isaac and Rebekah. Now, we sit there and think about it. Jacob and Esau didn't have a friendly relationship. In fact, you could say they pretty much hated each other. They fought a lot. I mean, a lot. And they were completely two different people. Esau was the big hunter, the manly man, the older brother. And Jacob, the younger brother, was, he was the kind one, the friendly one, the artistic one, not saying that you can't be both of those. So you can be both of those, be what you want to be. But the fact is, they were two different, and they were completely different. And in this story, it's found in Genesis. I highly recommend you look it up. It is down below on the page in the readings. I highly recommend you read it, as well as the questions. Answer those questions together as a family. It could lead to some tough conversations coming up that you may need to have, which is okay. I highly recommend it. But in this story, we find competition, we find jealousy, we find deception, we find conspiracy, and we find heartbreak. Now, I highly recommend you reading the story. It is a good one, but I'm going to sum it up for you. First off, we're going to start with this. Jacob was jealous because Esau was the older brother. He had the birthright of becoming the next in line. He was going to get his father's blessing, and that made Jacob very, very upset. So long story short, Esau came back from a busy day at the field and was starving. He was so hungry. Jacob had made some soup, and he said, I'll give you some soup if you give me your birthright. And so Esau, being as hungry as he was, decided to finally be like, fine, yeah, I'll do it. So Esau gave his birthright up to Jacob. But there was a lot of deception in it because it wasn't meant for Jacob. And Jacob used Esau's minutes for it. Sad thing is, Mom was involved on Jacob's side. She helped him. Another thing that happened, we talked about that blessing, right? Well, Jacob went and stole that as well. He dressed up because the fact was known Esau was a very hairy man. At this point in time, Isaac was very sick and ill and old and getting ready to pass on, so his vision wasn't very well. He used his feelings a lot, his hands to feel things a lot, to know which sound would come to him. So Jacob goes, gets the blessing from Isaac because he tricks him, because of that. He puts some fur on his hands to make it feel like human hair, and Isaac gives Jacob the blessing. Again, another deception because of Mom. Moms are great. Mother's Day was last weekend. I list my mom. I love my mom. But Mom was a bad person on this one. Let's just say that. She helped Isaac when she shouldn't have. And the last thing that had happened, and instead of apologizing for everything he had done, Jacob was scared and he ran away. Now, there's so much more to that story. I highly recommend you reading it. I really do. It is in the reading below. Read it. Check it out for yourself. It is a great story. It was very summed up by me, and I mean very. But, so, he ran away. And it had been many years after this, down the road. And Jacob was going to come back at one point, and he was going to run to his brother. He was coming to Esau's village. And here's the fact of it. Jacob was terrified. I mean, I would be too. If I had stolen my brother's birthright and then taken the blessing that was meant for my brother, and now I have to go see him. So he sent people ahead to see what would happen, and Esau said, no, have my brother come. They had the tough conversation. And the fact of it, through all of it, Esau forgave Jacob, and all he wanted was that relationship with his brother, because that's how an atypical family is. They took some time, they had the tough conversation, they worked through their difficulties, and they built that relationship. Now here's the truth of it. Tough conversations aren't easy. That's why they're called tough conversations. Truth is, you will have to have them, and as an atypical family, I recommend having them as soon as you can. Getting down to the nitty-gritty and figuring things out. Because in the long run, you build stronger relationships, and you're just there for one another even more. Thank you for joining today. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say. I hope you take some time to answer the questions and read the passage, because it truly is worth it. I hope you have an amazing day today. It's a beautiful day out. Again, I'm recording this early, so it's a little different. Today it's a beautiful day. I hope it is on Sunday as well, or whenever you watch this. But anyways, have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week. Spend some time with family. Have those tough conversations if you need to. God bless.